This is a place where forgotten stories from the Balkans come back to life. Dark legends, haunted places, true horror. If you're new here, don't worry. Just turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen carefully, because the abyss is whispering. Drekavac of the mountains, true testimonies from Southern Serbia. There is a mountain no one climbs after dusk. Locals call it Planina bez imena, the nameless mountain. It sits heavy in the southern fog, half-shrouded even on bright spring days, and when the wind howls across its jagged ridges, it sounds like the cries of a child, or something pretending to be one. I never believed the stories until I heard the cries myself. Not from afar, not from rumor, but from just outside my tent. I was a freelance journalist, hungry for anything strange and sensational. Serbia had been quiet on the folklore front for decades, and I thought maybe I could dig something out of its forgotten corners. The legend of the Drekavac was one of those dusty tales. An old pagan spirit, they said, the soul of a child that died unbaptized, cursed to wail for eternity. Harmless myth, right? So I packed my gear, borrowed a car, and drove deep into the Toplika region near the foot of the mountain. There was a village there, Gornja Luka, the last settlement before the wilderness swallowed the roads. On the map it barely existed, a cluster of roofs, a crumbling church, and nothing more. But something had changed. I wasn't the only one who'd heard the rumors. Over the past 6 months, the villagers had reported disappearances. Hikers, shepherds, children, each followed by that same chilling pattern, a night of crying outside their window. Then gone. I arrived just before dusk, the April chill biting harder than it should have. The village was quiet, too quiet, the kind you don't notice until you've stepped too far into it. No children played, no smoke from chimneys, only closed shutters and stares from half-lit doorways. At the kafana I met an old man named Stoyan, who broke silence first, though only after 2 shots of rakia and a heavy sigh, like he was about to betray something sacred. "You think you're here for a story," he said, "but this thing, it feeds on stories." I laughed, trying to break the tension. "You mean it hears us talking about it?" He looked me dead in the eye. "Worse, it listens to what we remember. It learns from memory." I felt my smile falter. He went on. "The Drekavac isn't like it was before. It used to be a beast, crawled on all fours, shrieking, clawing, dragging sheep into the trees. But now it walks like us. It speaks. It knocks." I didn't believe him. Not then. But that night I camped at the edge of the woods, half a kilometre from the base of the nameless mountain. The villagers had pleaded with me not to. One even left a cross by my tent flap when he thought I wasn't looking. At 2:41 a.m., I remember the time exactly, I was woken by a sound that tore through the silence like a knife across glass. Wah! Not an animal, not even a human baby. It was a cry stretched into something wrong, like an echo looped too long. I unzipped the tent just an inch, and that's when I heard it. A whisper, clear. "Ivan!" I swear I heard it whisper my name. I froze. Not just out of fear, out of confusion. No one in the village knew my real name. Not even Stojan. I'd signed the guest book with my journalist alias, Marko Petrovic. So how did it know? I zipped the tent shut, heart hammering against nylon, and tried to rationalize. A prank. A dream. Wind through the trees. Anything. But then came the knock. Knock, knock, knock. Not on the tent. On the tree beside it. Measured, deliberate. Like it knew the shape of a door and how humans knock. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When morning came, I packed. Fast. My hands shook as I unpinned the tent stakes, half expecting a shadow to appear over my shoulder. But there was nothing. No footprints, no broken twigs, just the quiet of dawn and a thin trail of white ash circling my tent like a ring of salt. I returned to the village, pale and silent. Stojan just looked at me and nodded. "You heard it." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Later that week I visited the ruins of the old monastery halfway up the mountain. It was barely standing, charred beams, blackened stones, and a bell that had melted into the earth. No one knew what fire had started it, but Stoyan said the Drekavac had once been sealed there. Monks fasted and prayed for 40 nights to trap it. "But you journalists," he spat, "you dig up graves and call it truth. Now it's awake." He handed me a cassette tape, unlabeled, dusty. "Play it, but only once, and not after dark." I did. In my hotel room, 2 towns over, far from the mountain. The recording was old, scratchy. The voice on it trembled, a girl no older than 10. "They said he lived in the trees," she whispered, "but I saw him come from the church. His mouth wasn't right. It stretched too wide when he smiled, and his eyes, they were backwards, white where the black should be." There was a pause. Then faintly a second voice, not the girl's. "I'm still hungry." And then silence. Next day I drove back toward Belgrade, radio off, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. I kept checking the rearview mirror like I expected to see someone in the back seat, or something. But nothing followed me. Not until I played the tape again. I know I wasn't supposed to. I know Stoyan warned me, but curiosity burns deeper than fear. It was late, maybe close to midnight. I was parked at a roadside motel just past Nish, windows closed, phone on silent. The tape player whirred like a dying insect, and the girl's voice crackled into life once more. "I saw him by the graves," she whispered again, digging with his hands, smiling like he knew I was watching. I leaned closer. Then came the same pause, but longer this time. Too long. I reached to stop the tape, and that's when it spoke again. But this time it wasn't the recording. From right behind me, just inches from my ear, I never left. I spun, nearly fell from the chair. But behind me, nothing. And then, silence. Not the silence of an empty room, the silence of something waiting to be heard. I left the motel at once. By now, every journalist's instinct in me was screaming to leave the story alone. But I couldn't. It had touched me. Something about the Drekavac wasn't just legend. It was viral, like a thought that once heard can't be unheard. An infection of memory. Back in Belgrade, I tried to return to my life. Typed up notes, sorted photos. Drafted a harmless travel piece about rural Serbia. But every night, just before sleep, I heard a whisper in the back of my mind. Not always my name. Sometimes it said other things. "Open the window. It's under the bed. I know what you remember." It got worse. One evening I came home to find the ash ring around my bed. Another time I found my laptop open to a folder I never created. Inside a single video, grainy, night vision. It showed me asleep in my tent at the base of the nameless mountain. But the timestamp was wrong. It said April 11th, 1993. I wasn't even born yet. And in the corner of the frame, something stood just beyond the fabric wall, breathing slow and deep, the tent canvas rising and falling like a heartbeat. I closed the laptop, unplugged it, threw it in the dumpster. The nightmares started a week later. Always the same, a forest, a scream, a door that shouldn't be there. And behind the door, teeth. I decided to go back. Not for the story, for answers. I returned to Gornja Luka with less gear and far less confidence. The air felt thicker this time, not just in temperature, but in weight. Like every tree leaned slightly toward me, as if eavesdropping. The village was quieter than before, though that seemed impossible. No one came to the kafana. No lights in the church, just the creak of the windmill turning in a breeze that didn't touch my skin. I found Stoyan in his backyard, staring at the woods. "I told you not to play the tape again," he said, without looking at me. "I know. You brought it with you, didn't you?" "I destroyed it." He finally turned. "It doesn't matter. You remembered it. That's enough." I didn't understand then, but I do now. Memory is the Drekavac's gateway. Once you let it in, even just by knowing, it starts to learn your shape, your fears, your past. It doesn't haunt places anymore. It haunts people. I asked him what I could do to stop it. Stoyan just handed me a lantern, an old Orthodox icon and a long rusted nail. "Go to the monastery," he said. "Seal what you opened." So I went. The hike up the nameless mountain was worse than before. Trees leaned in. Birds went silent. The deeper I walked, the more the ground seemed to pulse underfoot, like the whole mountain was breathing. I reached the ruins just after sunset. The last light of day bled across the stone like dying fire. The monastery's doorway had half collapsed, forming an arch that looked almost open-mouthed. I stepped inside. The air was rank with damp and rot. Walls were covered in old murals, saints, crosses, flames, all faded or scratched out. But in the center, just under the collapsed dome, was a circle of stones. Inside it, ashes, bone, a single child's shoe. I set down the icon, lit the lantern, took the nail and pressed its tip into my palm until blood welled up. The ground shivered. And then from the shadows came a voice, familiar, gentle. "Wrong. Do you remember me?" I turned, and there it stood, not a beast, not a shadow, but a child, barefoot, soaked in dirt and blood. Its eyes glowed white, not from light, but from emptiness. Its mouth smiled too wide, like someone had drawn it on with a knife. "I remember you," it said. I couldn't move. It stepped closer. "You listened to my story. You saw me. That's all it takes." And then silence, no breath, no wind. Just the thrum of my heart and the echo of those words. I did the only thing I could. I stepped into the circle, held up the icon, and drove the nail into the ground. The scream that followed wasn't human. It shattered the silence, split the air like thunder underground. The child's form writhed, flickered, changed. One moment it had long arms and a gaping chest cavity. The next, it was a swarm of flies. The next, it was me. "You can't forget me," it whispered. "I live where memory festers." And then silence. Real silence this time, the kind that feels earned. The circle glowed faintly. The wind returned. A nightjar called in the distance. The mountain sighed like a tension finally released. I staggered back down the path before dawn, never turning my back on the trees. That was 2 months ago. Since then I haven't heard a voice. No whispers, no dreams. I've stopped writing about it, stopped saying its name. But some nights, when I walk past a mirror or glance too quickly into a dark room, I swear I see a shape I almost recognize, like a memory that isn't quite mine. And then, silence. Tried to rebuild a normal life, moved apartments, changed cities. I even stopped using my real name. Ivan was buried beneath a stack of aliases now, reporter pseudonyms, digital ghosts. If the Drekavac truly fed on memory, I figured I could starve it out by becoming someone else. But you can't outrun something that lives inside you. One morning I found an envelope slid under my door. No stamp, no name, just a strip of paper inside. In Cyrillic it read, "Do you still remember the child?" I threw it away. 3 days later I got an email. No subject, no sender, just a single attachment, a sound file. I didn't want to listen. God, I didn't. But I clicked. It was my voice, talking in my sleep. Over and over, she never stopped screaming. She never stopped screaming. She never... Click. I snapped the laptop shut. The Drekavac hadn't gone back to the mountain. It had followed me. That night, I went out drinking for the first time in months. A bar near the outskirts of Drekavac full of smoke and half-lit stairs. I told myself I needed the noise, the chaos of the living to drown out whatever that thing had planted in me. But at the bar, a man tapped my shoulder. Pale, gaunt, a face like parchment paper pulled over bone. "You saw it," he whispered, eyes never blinking. "Did it show you the future?" I shook my head. He leaned in closer. It did me. And I keep waking up inside that vision. Every time I sleep, it begins again. He left before I could ask his name, and then silence. The crowd around me kept talking, kept laughing, but none of their voices touched me. It was like I was drifting inside a dream someone else was dreaming. That's when I knew. It wasn't just one Drekavac, it was a network of memory. A parasite that leapt from mind to mind, carried in trauma, in whispers, in the retelling. Every story breathed new shape into it, and the more it was remembered, the more real it became. I booked a train south. I needed to find others, survivors, witnesses, anyone who'd seen the thing and lived. I found my first lead-in, a schoolteacher named Jelena, who had lost her nephew in 2018, disappeared from his bed. No signs of break-in, no body, just an open window and muddy footprints on the ceiling. She showed me his drawings. Each one had a different form of the same creature. Sometimes a skeletal bird, sometimes a figure with too many limbs, sometimes just a smile in the dark, but always, always, the same caption scrawled beneath, "He watches from the walls." I collected dozens of testimonies over the following weeks. A hiker in Zlatibor who heard a baby crying for 10 hours straight from inside a cave that had no floor. A hunter in Jablanica who shot a deer only to find it still moving, whispering his name in his own voice. A nun in Pirot who claimed the Drekavac wore the face of her dead sister and asked to come inside the chapel. Each story different, each story the same. The thing adapts, the thing remembers, and every time we speak its name, we stitch it tighter into our world. The last person I spoke to, an old blind woman in a nursing home near Nishka Banja, gave me the final warning. "It lives in forgotten places," she said, "but it grows in the cracks of the mind. All it needs is for you to look back." I asked her what to do. She smiled with no teeth. "You write stories, don't you?" "Yes." "Then write the truth. Let others know. But when they ask if it's real, don't answer." She gripped my wrist, bony fingers strong despite her frailty. "Because once they know, they'll hear it too." And then, silence. The kind that leaves your ears ringing like something was just said, but you missed it. I began writing the article that night, not for publication, not for fame, but as a map, a warning disguised as a tale. I kept it off the internet, printed it on old paper, made copies by hand with a typewriter, the way Stoyan had said was safest, the way that didn't feed it with electricity or clicks. Still, I made one mistake. I read it out loud. It was late, rain tapping against the window. I wanted to hear the cadence of it, to see if the fear translated. I didn't even finish the first page before something shifted in the room. The temperature dropped. My breath misted. The typewriter ribbon began to spool on its own, dragging out a sentence I never typed. "You remembered me. I remembered you back." And then, silence. The story, unfinished, sat on the desk like a loaded gun. I fled the apartment, booked a room in a concrete-walled hostel with no mirrors. That's when I realized it didn't just need memory, it needed attention. I tried to erase it all, burned the pages, smashed the recorder, deleted the tapes, but it was too late. The Drekavac had threaded itself through me like a needle through flesh. I couldn't unknow it. That's when I found the website. A dark forum, deep in the layers of the net you only reach if you already know what to type. A thread titled, "Children of the Scream, What They Showed Me." Dozens of entries, all anonymous, all telling my story in pieces. It took my brother, came back wearing his skin. It fed off our grief, grew stronger when we mourned. I drew it once. It hasn't left me since. Some even referenced locations I'd been, villages I visited. A few mentioned a journalist with a recorder, me. They remembered me, which meant I had infected them too. That's when I realized the horror wasn't in the creature, it was in the chain reaction. The Drekavac was no longer bound to mountains or churches or ruins. It had become a meme, in the old sense of the word, a self-replicating idea, a whisper passed between ears that fed on attention, grief, fear, and I was now part of its engine. That night I heard it again, from inside the hostel closet. A voice, hoarse, childlike, gentle. You can't stop the story now. I didn't move. The closet creaked open, empty, and then silence. Except this time I could hear the silence breathing. I'm writing this now in haste. The words aren't for me. They're for you. Because if you've read this far, the thing knows you too. Maybe you'll hear it in the stillness before sleep. Maybe in the static between radio stations. Maybe when you see a child alone by the roadside smiling too wide. Just remember one thing. Don't speak its name. Don't finish the story out loud. And whatever you do, don't look back. The longer I stayed on the move, the more I noticed them. Others like me. Not the haunted. The infected. In waiting rooms, in bus terminals, in night trains across Serbia's forgotten rails. You could spot them by the way they stared too long at shadows, by how they flinched at laughter, by the bandaged wrists, the hands that wouldn't stop shaking, the eyes that never truly focused on anything around them. We never spoke. We didn't have to. Once you've heard the Drekavac whisper, once you've seen the shape of it in your memories, you become part of a silent kinship, bound by fear, by guilt, and by a sense of inevitability. But there was one man who did speak. His name was Vuk. He found me in the train station at Niš, slipped onto the bench beside me like a shadow taking shape. "You're Ivan," he said, "the one with the tape." I didn't answer. "Don't worry, I destroyed mine too." His voice was dry, hollow, like he hadn't used it in weeks. Maybe he hadn't. "I was a priest once," he continued, "until it visited my congregation. Took the altar boy first. Then the others started dreaming of him, crying at night, drawing symbols in their hymnals." I finally looked at him. His hands were covered in scars. Deep ones, like he had tried to cut something out. "I've come to believe," he said slowly, "that the Drekavac isn't a singular being. It's a filter. A lens that warps what you fear most, gives it form, life, hunger. It takes your grief and puts a face on it. Then it waits for others to see." "Like a plague," I said. He nodded. "But older, quieter. It doesn't need corpses, just eyes, just ears." He gave me a book, handwritten, bound in worn leather. "Read this only once, then decide." That night I did. It wasn't just a collection of stories, it was a ritual, a pattern. Pages describing how to trick the Drekavac, how to redirect it, how to feed it false memory, mislead it into thinking it had completed its cycle. One passage struck me like a punch to the gut. If a soul knowingly crafts a lie large enough, a fabricated trauma vivid and complete, the Drekavac may consume it in place of truth. It hungers not for reality, but for intensity. I stayed up all night, crafting my false memory. A sister I never had, drowned in a well that didn't exist. A village invented from whole cloth. A story more haunting than my own, laced with enough detail to feel real. And at the climax of that fiction, I buried her in a monastery that had burned to ash. I read it aloud at sunrise. Nothing happened, not at first. But the dreams stopped, the voices dulled, the shape in mirrors gone. Had I done it? Had I tricked the thing? That night I opened the closet again. Empty. And then silence. It's been nearly a year now. I live quietly. No articles, no interviews, no recordings. I work in a print shop, binding journals by hand. I don't ask what people write in them. But once a month I mail out a copy of my story, the false one, to a new name from the forum. Because if the Drekavac feeds on true pain, maybe we can poison it with fiction. Flood it with lies, smother it with false memories until it forgets how to be real. And if you're reading this now, if you felt that cold shadow near your ear at night, I ask you this: write your own false story, craft your grief, outweigh your fear, and whatever you do, don't ever say the real name. Don't bring it back, because it's still watching, still waiting, and all it takes is a whisper. If this story gave you chills, leave a like and subscribe for more Serbian horror. I'm just a guy from Serbia trying to make something real out of this. Every view, every comment, every subscriber helps me tell more stories. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and good night.